people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Bumgarner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It's official. On October 7th, Stevie Levy, the United Kingdom's own Stevie Levy, will be challenging Laura Grazab for what is Laura's EBU title in the women's super bantamweight division. Super bantamweight, that's 122 pounds. A few weeks ago, initially, the order was for Laura Grazab to defend the EBU title against Tycee Gallagher in Poland. But then news broke that Tycee Gallagher had booked herself a fight with none other than this division's WBO champion from France, Sigaline Lefavre. So if you're Tycee, why fight for a regional belt when you can fight for a world belt, a world title? Now Tycee's fighting Sigaline Lefavre and Laura Grazab is fighting Stevie Levy. Laura Grazab, who sports an unblemished record of 9 wins with no losses, no draws, 3 knockouts. She's not really big on power. Laura Grazab is more finesse than ferocity. She can show a bit of spite when she needs to step into her punches. She's not an artillery fighter. She's not a banger. She's not a brawler. She's a thinker, whereas Stevie Levy, who's a lot more rough around the edges, doesn't come from some deep amateur background like Laura Grazab does. Stevie sports a professional record of 9 wins with 1 loss, no draws, no recorded knockouts. A late starter in the sport who has the best intentions, though not the best pedigree or the best ability. For me and my money, it's too soon for Stevie Levy to be fighting somebody like this. But what you have to admire about Stevie is that she knows that. You know, she knows she's not Katie Taylor or Chantel Cameron, but she still wants to get out there. She still wants to give it a go. Not that long ago, she was calling for a fight with Shannon Courtenay. God only knows what Shannon's doing. I guess that young Stevie was barking up the wrong tree because that fight didn't materialize, and this one did. Stevie's coming off of 4 consecutive victories after having suffered her first professional loss to former champion of Argentina, Jorgelina Guanini, in April of last year. She has since fought 4 times, rebounding off that loss, racking up 4 consecutive victories. Though what you will notice is Stevie's only ever beat fighters that have upside-down records, losing records, more losses than victories. The one time she fought a fighter that had a winning record, more victories than losses, she lost. Jorgelina Guanini lost in one-sided fashion. She looked like she didn't even belong in there with Jorgelina. I don't have a problem with Stevie fighting these kinds of fighters because I actually think that she needs to get more rounds in the bank and get some experience. So it's because she needs to that I don't like her chances. I don't like her chances in Poland. I don't like her chances against Laura Grazab. Laura, who's faced 2 or 3 fighters that have had losing records, but she's also faced unbeaten fighters, unbeaten up-and-comers like Martine Besson and Marion Herreria. They were unbeaten. Maria Secchi, who she last fought, she had a winning record. She squared off with her in April of this year. See the difference? Yes, Stevie Levy has 1 more professional bout, 1 more professional fight than Laura Grazab does. But there's more to boxing than what you see on paper. On paper, it might look like they're in a similar place in their career, though as far as their ceiling, their ability as boxers, Laura's in a very different place than Stevie. Very different. Stevie Levy saw action 2 times already this year, and Laura Grazab, she was last in action in April of this year. So both fighters have fought in the last 12 months. No ring rust. Stevie Levy, she's still rough around the edges. She doesn't protect herself well enough for a fighter like Laura Grazab. She's open for shots, open for punches. It's a part of what's going to separate them. Stevie Levy doesn't have the same snap in her punches that Laura does, and she doesn't know her range, doesn't judge distance as well as Laura does. So overshooting it, she's open for punches. Laura's going to capitalize. Laura is a more seasoned and coordinated fighter, which enables her to thereby be a more accurate fighter. Accuracy. It's hard to be accurate when you don't know how to fully judge distance yet, when you're not coordinated. Laura's more coordinated than Stevie Levy. You can chalk that up to Laura Grazab's amateur experience and her experience in the pros shining through. Some things just boil down to practice. Some things just boil down to muscle memory.
Some things.
Stevie Levy, she seems to have a more impactful right hand than Laura Grazab. They're both orthodox fighters, both lead with their left in order to set up the right.
Stevie Levy's actually got a strong right hand.
Though I'd still favor Laura Grazab's left hand, her judicious left hand, to Stevie Levy's pernicious right.
It's an old saying in boxing. A good right hand, a strong one, could take you around the corner. Good right hand, but a good left hand, that'll take you around the world.
Laura Grazab is a more fluid, coordinated fighter than Stevie Levy, with better feet.
To make matters worse,
Laura Grazab is quite capable of making herself a moving target whilst fighting on the fly.
Yeah.
Stevie is a bit more flat-footed, fighting out of a wide stance.
because she's fighting out of a wide stance, that's going to slow her down when she's trying to get close to Laura.
Slower hands and slower feet than Laura, so when she goes to shoot a shot, not only is Laura going to slip it, she's going to counter. I envision the aesthetic of the match will look a lot like the fight that Laura had late last year with Spain's own Marion Herreria, an aggressive fighter looking to get mid-range to inside that's getting picked off.
Marion was a more put-together fighter than Stevie Levy is.
Coordination is key. Coordination is important, even when being the aggressor, even when applying pressure. And to beat somebody like Laura, you have to apply pressure, constant pressure, but not just pressure. You have to be able to cut the ring off. You have to be able to limit the moving target's exits.
Fight with Laura, it's going to be a scrappy fight where at times Stevie Levy is overshooting the distance and ending up in a clinch. Stevie's going to be the aggressor, I think, and Laura will be the defender.
Don't forget that it will be Laura Grazab that has home field advantage. Unfortunately for Stevie, I just don't think here and now she's got the skill set to make it decisive and make it emphatic in Poland as the away fighter. So I am going to go with Laura Grazab by way of a dominant points decision. I think she will consistently show the cleaner, neater, tidier work of the two in October. Men's heavyweight news, I'm sure most of you have heard by now that Joe Cusumano tested positive for a banned substance in Adam Kovnowski fight, the fight that Adam lost.
Seems like every other week now we're hearing about a fighter on a matchroom show that tests positive for a banned substance, but perhaps that's because Matchroom is testing more fighters more often than all their competitors.
Matchroom Boxing announced this past Tuesday that heavyweight contender Joe Cusumano tested positive for a banned substance in connection to his June fight with Adam Kovnowski. In what was a bruising encounter, Cusumano dropped Kovnowski in the first round and then finished him off with a high volume of vicious punches in the eighth. For Kovnowski, it was his fourth defeat in a row, and likely the end of the road for his career.
Probably.
There are those out there who are almost trying to shame Matchroom whenever a fighter ends up testing positive in association with their shows, not realizing the only reason you come to know that information is because they're testing more fighters than everyone else. If they weren't, you wouldn't hear about it.
You wouldn't even know.
Almost like they're trying to blame Matchroom for what these fighters may be putting into their systems when prying eyes aren't looking. If you're trying to say that it's Matchroom's fault that Joe Cusumano was on something, was it Bob Arum's fault that Oscar Valdez was on something? And what about Frank Warren? Was it his fault that Zolani Tete?
Zolani Tete.
Was it Frank Warren's fault that Zolani Tete was on something?
Zolani Tete.
The official outcome, unless Cusumano can prove his innocence, will become a no contest. And as far as Cusumano's career, his future is now up in the air, with the New York State Athletic Commission already investigating the matter. The win over Kovnowski was by far his biggest achievement to date and helped rebuild his career after being blasted out in a single round only 3 fights earlier by Daniel Dubois. Matchroom can today confirm that Joe Cusumano returned an adverse analytical finding as part of an anti-doping protocol mandated by the New York State Athletic Commission. Following his bout with Adam Kovnowski on the 24th of June, Matchroom stated on their official social media account.
You know what I see?
We don't know how long Joe Cusumano may have been using banned substances, but what we do know is that 3 fights ago, he was fighting on a Queensbury promotion show. Was there any testing in association with that show? VADA testing?
Does Queensbury Promotions, do Boxer, pay for anti-doping testing what Matchroom is paying for anti-doping testing?
Because if they're not, Frank Warren and all of his acolytes, all the critics, need to shut their fucking mouths and put their money where their mouth is.
The official statement from Matchroom continues, "We understand a process is underway with the New York State Athletic Commission, and Matchroom now defers to the applicable regulatory authorities on the next steps."
These people don't care about making the sport safer. Make no mistake, whenever they use that as a guise to criticize Matchroom and criticize Eddie Hearn,
You think they give a fuck about making the sport safer?
they watched Lou DiBella scramble to pick up Jean Pascal right after Jean Pascal tested positive for more than one banned substance, and nobody grilled him about it. His fighter, Hannah Gabriels, she tested positive for a banned substance.
All they offered up in terms of an explanation was the dog ate my steroids.
They don't care that much. They only care when it involves Matchroom. Matchroom's official statement continues, "Whilst we are disappointed by the news, this affirms Matchroom's ultimate desire to regularly test active fighters and ensure we continue to promote a clean and fair sport for all athletes. We will not be making any further comment. News of Cusumano's positive test comes on the back of several high-profile test failures in recent months, including heavyweight contender Dillian White, undisputed super featherweight champion Alicia Baumgartner, and heavyweight contender Robert Helenius."
Frank has a lot to say about the number of fighters that test positive on a Matchroom show, but how much testing is he doing on his own shows? How much of Queensberry's money is going into making it a safer sport?
How much of boxers?
Why don't people keep the energy for them that they keep for Matchroom?
It's just the other day I read a tweet from Victor Conti that reads, "Wow, Eddie Hearn has said we will have VADA testing for every show now, and more testing means more adverse findings. Yes, Eddie, more testing means a cleaner sport for all in boxing. Please walk the talk. We'll watch the VADA Twitter for the announcements."
Just see, he's almost chastising a guy for using VADA regularly, more regularly than Queensberry does, more regularly than Boxer does.
Take a trip over to VADA's Twitter page and take a look at their tweets and how many of them involve Matchroom shows. They have since announced that they will be conducting testing for the upcoming Jack Catterall versus Jorge Linares fight, the upcoming Jay Opataya versus Jordan Thompson fight, the upcoming Richardson Hitchens versus Jose Zepeda fight, the upcoming
Sandy Ryan versus Jessica McCaskill fight.
Top of announcing that both Anthony Joshua and Robert Helenius completed VADA testing for what was their fight a few weeks ago, and we know what happened with Robert. He tested positive for a banned substance. It's not my imagination that Matchroom is in fact paying more for anti-doping testing in association with their shows than Queensberry is, than Boxer is, but no one is grilling them, which begs the question, the scrutiny. Is this really about anti-doping in the sport?
How much are Golden Boy Promotions paying for VADA testing? What about the PBC?
What about Top Rank? If I go on VADA's Twitter page right now, will I see Top Rank mentioned as many times as Matchroom is mentioned in association with anti-doping testing?
Let me stop beating around the bush. I don't think the scrutiny that Eddie Hearn and Matchroom gets has anything to do with a cleaner sport, because if it were, the energy would be even. It would be even across the board, and it so obviously isn't.
So if it isn't, what is this really all about? The scrutiny and the criticism that Eddie Hearn and Matchroom get. What actually motivates it?
What's it really all about?
He said it's a nonsense for this fight to happen. It can't happen, and he proposed Zach Parker as a fighter for Chris Eubank to fight next.
Yeah, is it as much of a nonsense as David Hay fighting Derek Chisora under a Luxembourg commission at West Ham? Look, again, the king of hypocrisy. Like, how's it a nonsense? I mean, it's the biggest fight in Britain outside of Fury against AJ. So, unfortunately for Frank, he's going to have to sit back and watch this one unfold.
Zach Parker, Eubank Jr.?
Zach Parker, he just got stopped by John Ryder in 2 rounds or 3 rounds. I mean, why don't you make, I don't know, who else have they got around that way? Make some fights. Why don't you make Hamza Shiraz against Denzel Bentley? Why would you want to marinate that? I mean, I listened to him the other night. Yeah, marinate that. Maybe when they've both got a world title, then we can sell out the O2. Shut up, make the fight now. It's a good fight. With all due respect, Zach Parker against Chris Eubank Jr. is not exactly Chris Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn selling out Wembley, is it? So, you know, enjoy getting your dough from Fury and Garner and pretending you're promoting it, and then watch Eubank Benn unfold. And Zach Parker can fight someone else. Zach Parker can fight maybe Diego Pacheco. Good fight.
Did you catch the bit about Frank Warren saying that the Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight, that can't happen? Why? Why can't it happen? Because of Conor Benn's anti-doping fiasco? It's been a while now.
An anti-doping fiasco didn't stop you from signing Tyson Fury.
Tyson Fury had his own anti-doping fiasco, the same as Conor Benn. Tyson Fury tested positive for nandrolone, absconded for 2 years or 2.5 years, and as soon as he came back, Frank didn't hesitate to sign him. He didn't hesitate to work with him.
So, once again, is this really about cleaning up the sport? Is this really about making it safer? Is it really about doping and anti-doping? Or is it about something else?
I'll tell you what it's about.
Losers.
Losers hate winners. It is true that the PBC is having the best year in boxing I've ever seen them have. The biggest shows in the sport this year,
This one.
most of them happen to be PBC shows, but none of them happen to be Queensberry shows or boxer shows.
Think about it.
Do you think that Frank Warren wants Eddie Hearn to pull off this Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight? Do you realize that the fight is now bigger than it was when they first tried to make it? The controversy only added to the fight's profile, only added to the fight's marquee value. And do you think that Ben Shalom, do you think that Frank Warren want to see that fight come into fruition?
They're grasping at straws, trying to criticize Eddie behind the guise of trying to make it a cleaner sport when all that exposes is how little they're doing about it.
You think they're standing on principle when they bring up this anti-doping stuff? They're not. They're just using that as an avenue to criticize Eddie Hearn and criticize Matchroom because they're still being outdone by Eddie Hearn. They're still being outdone by Matchroom.
They still are.
Frank Warren's top draw hasn't fought all of this year, and the only fight he's set to have is a circus fight, not a real boxing match. I don't even know if you could call that a Queensberry promotion, since it's not happening on Queensberry's dime.
That's what Frank's top draw is doing.
I don't know how big or how small the Eubank versus Smith fights were, but what I do know is that the Conor Benn fight will be a bigger fight than any of those fights or both of those fights put together.
That's what this is all about. You think this is about anti-doping.
Just using that as a means to criticize Matchroom because they're still struggling to keep up with Matchroom.
So they're using this.
To tear Eddie Hearn down, to tear Matchroom down, even though the effort is not equal on all sides of the board. Ben Shalom ain't doing what Eddie's doing. Neither is Frank Warren.
As soon as I point that out, Eddie Hearn's critics become bored with the subject. And you know why they become bored? Because they don't care about cleaning up the sport either. That's not what this is about.
Not Eddie Hearn's publicist. If you hate the guy, you can hate the guy. I'm just pointing out.
You're full of shit.
You don't care about doping in the sport of boxing. You don't care about cleaning it up.
You're full of shit.
You're full of it. And the real reason you're criticizing this guy is likely because you're a fan of a fighter that's with another outfit.
Say Tyson Fury.
Seems to be the common denominator amongst Eddie Hearn's biggest critics, like Simon Jordan and the people over there at Talk Sport.
Just calling a spade a spade. What do you expect me to do? You think I don't see all these inconsistencies?
And what is consistent? That they wear kid gloves when they're handling Frank Warren, asking him softball questions. They don't got that kind of courtesy for Eddie Hearn.
You think people don't notice?
All the way across the Atlantic Ocean, and I can see it.
You're hypocrites.